click the bell icon to turn on notifications.
Hello everyone, how are we all this evening? Welcome to tonight's webinar on advanced formulas in Excel. This is Deb, and as you can probably tell, I am on my own this evening. We are a man down. Unfortunately, Adam isn't very well this evening, so I'm going to be managing the webinar on my own. Now, I just want to do a quick check, first of all, that everybody can hear me. So if you can just type into the chat panel if you can hear me okay, just so I know that I'm not speaking into a blank space. I can see Missy is typing. I'm hoping that means that you can all hear me. Wonderful. Okay, this is good stuff. As you can probably tell, I'm not used to managing the logistics of a webinar. I normally leave that to Adam. Anyway, I hope everyone's okay. The world is still a little bit of a disaster at the moment, so I hope you're all doing okay wherever you are. I'm going to very quickly drop into the chat panel the worksheet that I'm going to be using, so just bear with me one second. And you can use this to work along with me. Happy New Year. Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. You should see that coming through in the chat panel. So if you just want to open that, you can work through with me if you want to. If you don't, that's fine. You can wait for the recording tomorrow and follow through then. All right, so let me share my screen with you and we will get going with today's session. So let's make sure. Click in there. Okay, perfect. Right, let's pull up the PowerPoint presentation. So we are going to be covering a topic which we haven't covered for a very long time, and that is advanced formulas in Excel. Now, for those of you, if we've got anyone who's new on the call today, my name is Deb Ashby, and I'm a Microsoft IT trainer. So that means I specialize in all of the Microsoft applications. I run classroom training, webinars, I write blogs, all of that fun kind of stuff. Now, we're going to be taking a look at advanced formulas, and as I said, what some people consider advanced, other people don't. So it is a rather subjective term. So hopefully I'm going to have pitched this at the right level today. Now, what I will say is that this is quite an intense session, and it does kind of rely on the fact that you already know a little bit about formulas. I'm not going to linger too much on any of the basics of formulas. We're just going to dive straight in, and we're going to be doing quite a lot of examples back to back, and I'm going to get through as many of them as I can in 1 hour. I've prepared 8 or 9 or so, and we're going to be combining lots of different formulas together to create a formula which will perform specific tasks, so things you might find useful. So let's take a look at the agenda. So we're going to start out with logical functions, and I thought we'd start with this because I think when you're first getting into formulas, the if formula is probably one that you would learn very early on. So I thought we would start with that as it's probably most familiar to people. We're going to take a look at IFS as well, and also using and or in combination with if. We're then going to move on to taking a look at how we can perform two-way lookups using index and match. And then I thought I would show you how you can do how you can assign random values using the choose and RANDBETWEEN functions. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how you can find the most frequently occurring value in a list using index, match, mode, and SUMPRODUCT. We're going to do some looking up of values, everyone's favorite. You might be used to using things like VLOOKUP. Well, XLOOKUP is Excel's latest lookup feature, and it is so much easier to use than things like VLOOKUP and index and match. It does also have some additional options, so I want to make sure that you understand what those do as well. We're going to have a quick look at extracting text strings, so how you can extract text from a string using the left, right, len, and find commands. We're going to do a little bit of sum and count with multiple criteria, so that is using SUMIFS and COUNTIFS. And then finally, if we make it all the way through to here, we're going to do some dynamic sum calculations using sum, offset, and match. I'm quite exhausted just reading that list. So without further ado, let's dive straight in. So let me pull up my workbook and then we can get started. Now, there will be a recording of this, so if you do want to follow along tomorrow, if I'm going a little bit too quick, then feel free to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start out with if formulas, and I'm going to show you again, just so that we're all on the same level, a basic if, and then we're going to move into some of the more advanced ways that you can use if. So what I have here is a reasonably straightforward data set, just a small data set. This might be, let's say, sales for an online company. So we've got some customer names listed down in column A. We have the number of orders that they've placed over time, if they're a member of the website or not, and then the total amount that they've spent. And what I want to do here is I want to work out if these people are going to receive a discount. And I have my criteria over in columns J and K. So if they've spent over $600, then they're going to receive a 15% discount. Okay, so we can do this using a basic if function. So I'm going to type in if, open my bracket, and we can see our arguments underneath. Now, the way that if works is that it is part of the logical functions group, and you perform a logical test, and then it returns a result depending on if the answer to that test is true or false. So the first argument that you're required to give is that logical test. And I generally just tend to work this through in my head. So if the total, so the value in D6, is greater than, we're using a logical operator there, the value in J6, and because I'm going to copy this formula down, I need to make sure that I make that cell reference absolute by pressing the F4 key, comma. So if that logical test is true, if that total is greater than 600, what do I want Excel to do if it's true? Well, I could type in something like yes or no. So I might want to see yes if they're going to get a discount, or the word no. But in this case, I want it to actually perform the calculation. I want it to work out what 15% of that total is. So what I'm going to say is, if this is true, I want to do D6 multiplied by K6. And again, I want to lock this because I'm going to copy this formula down, comma. What do I want it to do if that is false? Well, if it's false, they're not going to receive a discount. I just want it to have 0 in there. So I'm going to put 0 in quote marks. Close my bracket, hit enter, and there I get my discount, like so. Now remember, you didn't have to put a 0 in there. You could have put some text. So maybe you wanted it to say no discount, or if you just wanted it to have a blank in there, then just have 2 quote marks. Okay, so that's how a basic if statement works. Reasonably straightforward. So now that we know that, let's move on to taking a look at some more complex examples and combining them with other logical functions. So on this spreadsheet, let's take a look at the data that we're analyzing. So in column A, I have a list of different items. Again, these might be items that have been sold on some kind of website. We then have the sales figure, so how much sales those items have generated, and we've just got some conditional formatting applied there to show the value. And then I have 3 columns that I want to fill in, and I'm going to fill these in completely different ways so that you can see how each of these work. And the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to combine the if with the and function. And what we're trying to do is listed above in this text box. So basically what I want to work out here, I want to say if the sales are greater than 30,000 and less than 45,000, if both of these pieces of criteria are true, then I want it to return the result of OK. If they're false, I want it to return the result of review. Now, I'm going to use the AND function here as well because I have 2 pieces of criteria at the top. Now, let me show you what this looks like if I was just to use AND. If I type in AND, it's asking me for my first logical test. So my first logical test is going to be if the sales, wrong way around, are greater than, and then I've got 30,000 over here in cell G5, and I'm going to lock that. And then my second logical test is if the sales are less than 45,000, which I've got in G6, lock that, close my bracket. If I was just doing that function and pressing enter, it's going to give me a result of false, because the only answers that you can have with AND or its sister function OR are true or false. Now, in this case, I want it to say OK or review. So I need to wrap it in an if function so that I can get it to do that. Okay, so let's double click and edit our formula. I'm going to go to the front here. I'm going to add in if, open a bracket. My logical test is essentially my AND formula just here. And all I need to add on the end is what I want it to say if the value is true. So I want it to say OK if both of those are true. And then I want it to say review if one or both of those are false. Okay, hit enter, and now I get a different result. Okay, so just remember that if you're using AND and OR, the only possible result you can get from those is true or false. If you want to make it more meaningful, wrap it in an if statement. So now we've got our heads around that, let's move on to the next one. Now for this, we've got lots and lots of pieces of criteria that we want to add in. Now you can do something called nested ifs, where you have if statements inside other if statements. But we don't need to do that because we have a function called IFS. Okay, so let's type in IFS. Now I prefer to use this rather than going through the nested if process because it's just a little bit quicker and easier to understand. And this is where you can start adding in lots of different logical tests and then producing a result. So it's asking me for logical test 1. So let's take a look at our text above. My first piece of criteria here is sales are greater than 30,000 and less than 45,000. And if that's true, I want it to say good. Now again, because I have two pieces of criteria, I need to use my AND function. So I'm going to type in AND and open my bracket. First logical test is if the sales are greater than 30,000, and we need to lock that. Second logical test is if the sales are less than 45,000, and F4 to lock that. Close our bracket, comma. What do I want it to say if this is true? Well, I want it to say the word good, comma. Look at the arguments. It now moves on to logical test 2, so I can carry on going. So if we look at our text above, I have a second piece of criteria. So if the sales are greater than or equal to 45,000, then I want it to say excellent. So let's do that. We're going to say B5 is greater than or equal to 45,000, and we're going to press F4. Comma. If that's true, we want it to say excellent, comma. Logical test 3. The final thing we're going to do here is if the sales are less than 30,000, then we want it to say review. So we're going to go through the same process. We're going to select B5, 30,000, F4 to lock. What do we want it to do? If that is true, we want it to output the word review and close our bracket. So we've managed to combine lots of pieces of criteria in there in order to get our result, and then copy that down. Okay, so IFS is a great replacement for nested ifs, and it does work out slightly shorter annotation wise when you're typing it in. Now, I wanted to finish off with something that's a little bit more interesting, and that is if you want to interpret your results of your if as a symbol. So you can see here, I've got a little table that has a tick symbol and a cross symbol. And what I want to do in here is I want to use an if statement combined with OR to produce a result. And if we look above, I want it to say if sales are greater than or equal to 45,000, or less than or equal to 30,000, then I want to show a symbol. So we're going to construct this in the same way that we did the AND. Now mine's all aligned to the middle in here, so let's do if, open our bracket. Now again, I have two pieces of criteria at the top, but they're separated this time with OR. So I'm saying either one of these can be true in order to make this a true result. So I want to use the OR function. Open my bracket. So if the sales B5 are greater than or equal to 45,000, F4 to lock, comma, or the sales less than or equal to 30,000 and lock. We're going to close that off. If that's true, then what do I want Excel to do? Well, if either one of those is true, I want it to show the tick symbol. So all I need to do here is say value if true is whatever is in cell G9. And again, because I'm copying this down, we lock that cell. If it's false, I want it to produce whatever is in cell G10 and lock. Close bracket. Let's see what we get. Let's hit enter. Now this might look a little bit strange. You can see I've got all of these weird characters. Now that is because of the formatting that I have applied to these cells. So essentially what I need to do here is, because these symbols are, I think they're Wingdings 2 symbols that I inserted, I need to make sure I have the same formatting on these cells. So I'm going to go up to home, into our font group, and I'm going to type in, I think this is Wingdings 2. Let's have a look. Yes. So as soon as I change the formatting of those cells, you can see I now get those symbols in there. And you can use that process not just for symbols, but for other things as well, to really customize the way that you're looking at this data. So those are the different ways, more advanced ways, that you can use if and combine it with other logical functions. All right, let's move on to our next example. This time we're going to take a look at two-way lookups. Now, if you've used index and match before, then you may not have used them quite in this way, where we're kind of doing a two-dimensional lookup. So if we look at our data, you can see that I have some company names in column A. So these might be travel companies. Then we have the months of the year running across the top, January to December. And then in the middle, we have the revenue or the sales for these particular companies for each of the months. And what I'm trying to do here is, underneath, I want to be able to select a company, select a month, and then have it produce the revenue. So I need a formula that's going to be able to look down and find the company, look across and find the correct month, and then where they intersect, that's the value it's going to give me. And we do this using or doing a two-way lookup. Now, just to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to set up the company and the month as data validation lists. And data validation is one of my favorite things in Excel. It's on the data tab, and in the data tools group, you will find an option for data validation. And I'm going to create a list. So I want to select list, and my source for this list is going to be all of the companies. And click on OK. And you'll see what I then get is a little drop-down arrow which lists out all of those companies, and I can very easily toggle between the different companies. Let's do the same for month. Same process up to data validation. I'm going to select list. We're going to select our source, this time the months, and then click on OK. I have another drop-down where I can select my months. So depending on what I have in these two cells is going to determine what the revenue is just here. And we need to do a two-way index and match. So let's construct our index. Now, the first argument for index is the array. And the way that I like to think of this is, what exactly are you looking up? I'm looking up the revenue. And where are those revenue figures? Well, they're here. My answer is going to be somewhere within these figures, so that is my array. Comma. Row number. Now, I don't know what the row number is going to be, because the row number is determined by whatever company I have listed in cell G14. So to find the row number, I need to do a match. My lookup value is going to be the company, comma. My lookup array, where am I going to find that company name? I'm going to find it somewhere in the company list, comma. What kind of match do I want to do? Well, I want to exactly match the name of the company. So I'm going to say 0, close my bracket. So that's one match that I've done, but I now need to do another match. So let's put in comma, match, open bracket, and we're going to do exactly the same. Lookup value this time is G15, comma. Where am I looking this up? I'm looking it up in the months, comma, and I'm doing an exact match. Close the bracket. Oh, I think I've missed off a closing bracket, and that is the good thing about Excel. If you don't ever get your brackets right, it will automatically add them for you. So I'm going to say yes to accept the correction, and there we go. So if we double check, let's say footsteps for April. There we go, there's the figure, and I can see that that is correct. Now I'm just going to apply a little bit of currency formatting to that to make that match. And then what we should find is that when we change our selections, everything updates nicely. So that is how you can use index and match to do a two-way lookup. Let's move on to the next example. Now this one I thought was just kind of a little fun thing which could be really useful depending on the kind of tasks that you do, and I haven't seen it demoed too often in all the numerous videos that I tend to watch over the course of a week, so I thought this would be quite a nice one to show. And this is the ability to assign random items or assign items in a random way to specific values. So let's take this example. I have a list of names just here. So let's say these are employee names. And we have some team names underneath the choices heading. Now, maybe, let's imagine a scenario here. Maybe it is the office Christmas party. And you want to assign people into different teams to do a specific task. What I could do is I could list out their names and then completely assign random choices to them based on the items that I have here. So we're going to use RANDBETWEEN and choose in order to do that. Now, if you've never used the RANDBETWEEN function before, and I think I put this on LinkedIn the other day, this is probably my most used function in Excel. And I know that is very specific to the type of work that I do, but if you've never used it before, it is a great way of getting lots of numbers into your spreadsheet very quickly. So if you have to do or enter dummy data from time to time, this is a really good way of doing it quickly. Let me just show you what the function does first of all. The first argument is bottom, so you can specify a lower end number. So it can be whatever you like. So let me say 1,000. And then you can specify a top number. So I'll say 5,000, close my bracket, and it will basically pick a random number, which you can then copy down and you can then copy across. You can then format this as currency format or whatever it is that you're doing. So if you need to get random numbers into a spreadsheet, this is a great little formula to use. Now we're going to combine RANDBETWEEN with the choose function in order to assign these team numbers randomly to these employees. So let's start out with our RANDBETWEEN. Open bracket. Now for this, our bottom number is going to be 1, comma. Our top number is going to be in relation to the number of choices that we have. So here I have 4 choices, so my top number is going to be 4. Obviously, if you had more, you would change that top number. I'm going to close my bracket. Now what I'm going to do, if I just hit enter here and copy this down, it's basically going to assign a number, a random number between 1 and 4 to each of these people. But I want to assign these teams. So I need to wrap this in the choose function. What I'm going to do is click at the end, comma. It's then going to ask me for all of the values that I want them to choose between. So my first value is basically team A. And because I'm going to copy this, I need to F4 it. I think I'm going to work up in the formula bar because there's a bit more room, comma. Value number 2 is the second choice, which we're going to lock. Value number 3 is the third choice, which we're going to lock. And then finally, the fourth choice, which we're going to lock. Close the bracket, hit enter, and now if I copy this down, you can see that it's going to assign those teams randomly to those different employees. Now, hopefully you can think of different scenarios where this might be useful to you, but as I said, I don't see many people demonstrating this too much, so that's how you can do it. So just a nice little one there. Moving across, I told you these are coming quick and fast. I know it's a lot to keep up with if you're trying to. As I said, we are going to send out a video for this tomorrow, so if you want to follow along at your own pace and really kind of get into it and understand, then I would definitely recommend that you do that. Right, let's move on to finding the most frequent value in a list. And again, I'm keeping this example really simple so that it's easy for you to understand. What I have here is a list of names, and you can see that some of these names repeat. And what I basically want to do, or what I'm trying to achieve, is in this results cell just here, cell D4, I want it to tell me which name occurs most frequently in this list. Now, you might think that that would be a fairly straightforward thing to do, but it actually does take a little bit of combining formulas in order to get this to work correctly. And I'm sure there's probably a shorter formula out there to do this, but this is just the way that I do it. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here, and I want you to bear with me because I'm going to do a match. Now, my lookup value, I'm going to select the full range of names, comma. My lookup array, I'm going to select the same range of names, and I'm going to say I want to do an exact match. Now, you might be thinking, what on earth are you doing there? Well, let's look behind this formula and see how it's calculating. Now, if you ever want to see how a formula is going to calculate, press the F9 key. And it will basically show you what the result of this formula is going to be. So what it's doing is it's basically comparing this list with this list again. And what it's done is it's assigned a unique number to the names. But every time it finds a duplicate name, it assigns the same number. So if we take Natasha as an example, you can see here it's assigned it number 1. It's the first one in the list. But if we look along our numbers, we can see that we have another one just here, and that's going to be in row 10 where we have Natasha again. So Excel has assigned the number 1 to Natasha. I thought my Alexa was about to reply to me there for a moment. I had a scary feeling. And all we need to do now is basically add in the mode function, because the mode function will tell me which number occurs most frequently. So let's Control Z to come out of there. And I'm going to add mode onto the front. Open the bracket. And remember, whenever you open a bracket, you need to close off another one. Now, if I press F9 to see what we're going to get, it's telling me that it's found the number 3 most often. And who is in position 3? That is Crystal. Now, I put this spreadsheet together, so I know that that is the right answer. Crystal does occur most frequently in this list of names. But I don't want it to produce the result of 3. I want it to produce the name Crystal. So let's Control Z to come out of there. What we need to do is wrap this entire thing in an index. So I'm going to index the same array. And then, of course, we just need to add one more bracket on the end. Now, what we've essentially created for ourselves here is an array formula. And I don't want to get too much into arrays because they can get quite complex. But just think of an array formula as multiple calculations within one formula. And the way that you accept them is slightly different to the way that you accept regular formulas. So normally, once you've finished, you press the Enter key and your formula would calculate. If I was to do that on this formula, it's not going to work. If you have an array formula, you need to press Control, Shift, and Enter. So let's do that. Control, Shift, Enter, and it pulls back the name Crystal. Now, one thing to note here, if you look in the formula bar, you can see that the formula is now surrounded by these curly braces or curly brackets. And that's how you know that it's an array formula. Now, if you're anything like me, I always forget to add the Control, Shift, Enter on the end. So a lot of the time, what I like to do is get rid of that Control, Shift, Enter by wrapping the part which is doing multiple calculations in the sum product formula. And sum product basically gets around having to do Control-Shift-Enter. So the place where I need to add this is just before where it says mode. So I'm going to add in sum product, open my bracket, and then of course add another bracket on the end. And because I have that, it means that I can just hit enter and it's going to calculate without the need for Control Shift and Enter. Now, if that was very confusing, if you're not familiar with array functions and how they work, I would definitely do some further reading on that so it makes more sense what I've done there. So that is how you can find the most frequent value. Let's move on to possibly one of my favorite new functions in Excel, XLOOKUP. Now, XLOOKUP is part of the whole lookup family of functions. So you might be used to using VLOOKUP, you might be used to using HLOOKUP, even index and match you might have some familiarity with. XLOOKUP has a lot more options than VLOOKUP, for example. It's also a lot more flexible. Now, when I say flexible, let me show you the data that we're going to be looking up our information in. So on the Employees tab, I have this little table here, and it is a table. I've formatted it as a table, and I've called the table Employees. Now, this is a list of people's start dates, the team that they're currently in, their location, and then we have their name. Now, I have purposely ordered this in a bit of a strange way. Normally, what you would most likely see, or excuse me, if you were putting together this data, you would probably have the name in column A. Now, the reason why I've put it in column D is really just to show you the flexibility of XLOOKUP and the difference between XLOOKUP and VLOOKUP. If I wanted to use VLOOKUP to look up information in this table, and I wanted to use the name as my lookup value, it's not going to work because VLOOKUP can only look from left to right. So your lookup value always has to be to the left of the information that you want to look up. Whereas with something like XLOOKUP, you can have the information on the right and essentially look backwards and pull back information. So that's one advantage of XLOOKUP. So let's take a look at how it works. And I will say, if you've never used this and you find yourself using index and match frequently, this is going to blow your mind. At least it did with mine when I first saw it, because it's so much easier. So what we have on this spreadsheet is we have the names of our employees. We then have their salary. We have a job rating for them. And then the rest of these columns are empty. And we're going to complete them using XLOOKUP. So the first thing we want to look up here is the team that these employees are in. And it's asking us for a lookup value. Now remember, your lookup value always needs to be the piece of information that's common between the two tables. So for me, that's going to be the name. So my lookup value is going to be A4, comma. Lookup array, where am I looking up this name? Well, I'm looking it up on the employees worksheet in this column just here. Now, if you take a look up in the formula bar, you can see the way this is laid out. And this is because it's not showing cell references because I have this information in a table. So if you format it as a table, it's going to show you the table name, which in my case is employees, and then the column that you've selected, which is name, as opposed to the cell references. Comma. Third argument, return array. What information do you want to return? Well, I want to return the team. So again, I'm going to select the team range. Comma. Now, I will say that the rest of these arguments are all optional. They're in square brackets, which means I don't have to input these options. I could, if I wanted to, just end it there and my XLOOKUP would be done. It's so much quicker and easier than index and match. But I am going to add in some of these options. So if it can't find the value, what do I want Excel to do? Well, I'll just have it say not found. Comma. Match mode. Now, match mode and search mode, which we're going to look at in a minute, these are options that are exclusive to XLOOKUP. So you don't find these when you're doing something like a VLOOKUP. So we're going to do an exact match this time because I want it to exactly match the name, Bonnie Moss. So 0 for exact match. And this time I get to choose which way I'm searching through the data. So I can search first to last, last to first, or I can search based on a sort in ascending or descending order. Now I'm just going to search first to last. So my final argument here is a number 1. Close the bracket, hit enter, and it pulls back that team, which I can then copy down. Now note just here, we have team and then we have current team. You might be thinking, well, aren't they both the same thing? Well, if I jump across to employees, what you'll see here is that, let's take Bonnie as our example. Bonnie started at this particular company in 2015 in the development team. But if I look further down this list, you can see that Bonnie actually moved to a different team in 2017. She moved to the special projects team. So effectively, Bonnie is no longer in the development team. But the way that I've done my XLOOKUP, because it's looking from the top to the bottom, it's pulling back the first one that matches, so it's pulling back development. So if I want to get their latest team, I want to work from the bottom up. And that is where I can change one of those options to get this to work. So let's do our XLOOKUP again. And this is pretty much virtually going to be exactly the same. Our lookup value is the name, comma. Our lookup array is going to be this array. I'm working up in the formula bar again. The return array is going to be the team. If it can't find anything, I'm just going to have it display nothing. Let's just do 2 quote marks. My match mode, I want it to do an exact match, so 0, comma. This time, this is the option I need to change to get the correct answer. So instead of searching first to last, I'm going to search last to first. So my final argument is -1. Close the bracket, hit enter, and you can see it's now pulling back special projects. If I copy that down, most of these are going to be the same because most people haven't moved to a different team. But for example, Kathy Wong, I can see that she has also moved from the IT team into the training and development, which is her current team. Okay, so I just really wanted to highlight those differences with those different types of search mode. Let's take a look at something else now, again using XLOOKUP. This time we want to find the amount of bonus each of these employees is going to get. And I have a little table on the right hand side which shows the job rating and the bonus assigned to each of those job ratings. We also have a column C, which shows the job rating for each of these employees. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that these aren't all necessarily whole numbers. So some people in here have a job rating of 4.3. Now, if I look at my table, I don't have 4.3. It's either going to be 4 or I could round it up to 5. But with XLOOKUP, I can basically say what I want to do, whether I want to round it up or if I want to round it down. And in this case, I'm going to round down. So I would expect somebody who gets 4.3, they're actually going to get the bonus of a 4 job rating, which is 8%. Someone who has a 1.2 is going to get a bonus of job rating 1, which is 0%. Okay, so let's take a look at our XLOOKUP. We'll do the same thing, XLOOKUP. Our lookup value this time is the piece of information that's common between our 2 tables. So that is the job rating, C4. I'm going to look up C4 in the job rating column, J4 to J8, and I'm going to copy this down. So I want to lock both of those cells by pressing F4, comma. My return array is going to be the bonus. So I need to select both of those and press F4 to lock. If not found, I just want it to say nothing. Now this is where I need to change something. So instead of doing an exact match, I want to do an exact match or next smaller item. So that's essentially going to round it down. So I'm going to say -1 in my match mode, comma, search mode. I don't mind, search first to last. I'm going to add 1 on the end. Close my bracket, hit enter, and then I can safely copy that down. And I should find that that works correctly. So let's take a quick look. 4.3 should be rounded down to 4. The bonus is 8%. And yes, I can see that that's all working correctly. Okay, so There we go. Those are the different modes and the things that you don't have in VLOOKUP that you need to know when it comes to using XLOOKUP. Now, just to finish off this worksheet, we're going to do a very simple sum calculation to calculate the new salary. So we want to do the salary multiplied by the bonus, and then we want to plus the salary again to add that back on top. Hit enter, and then we can copy that down. Okay, so that is XLOOKUP. It is a lot easier than index and match. Let's move across to extracting text. So for this one, this is if you ever need to extract text from an email address, for example. If you can just bear with me for 1 second. There we go. Yeah, okay. So here we have a list of names and we have a list of email addresses. Now, if you have a text string like this, there may come a time where you want to extract certain parts out of that email address. For example, I want to extract the username, which is basically everything before the @ symbol. So where it says bmoss, cody.flesher, Moses, so on and so forth. So what I could do is use text functions to do this. Now, if I type in equals, and again, if you're familiar with text functions, you might think to yourself, well, I can use the left text function, which extracts text from the left. And there's only a couple of arguments for the left function. The first argument is text. So what is the cell which contains the text you want to extract? So B4. But we have a problem when we get to number of characters, because this only works really well if you have consistency with the number of characters you want to extract. Now, I don't have that in this case, because if you look at those usernames, they're different lengths in each email address. So I can't specify 4 as the number of characters, because whilst that might be correct for one of them, it's not going to be correct for all of them. So I need to do something a little bit different here. So what I'm going to do is we're still going to say left. We want to extract text from cell B4. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for something that's common in all of them, and that is the @ symbol. So I'm going to add in find, open bracket. And with this, we have a few different arguments. The first one is, what text do you want me to find in this cell? Well, I want to find the @ symbol, and that needs to go in quote marks. Oops. Comma. Within text, well, I want you to find it in cell B4. I'm going to close my bracket. So what I'm essentially doing there is I'm looking for the @ symbol. And if I was to hit enter, let's just do that and see what we get. Oh, I need to add another bracket on the end, which I missed. It's done it, but it's included that @ symbol. Okay, now I don't want it to include the @ symbol, so I need to make a minor modification here. I'm going to say, okay, once you found that @ symbol, -1 character to just give me the username. And now when I copy that down, you'll see that it extracts those quite nicely. All right, so we're searching for something that's common, and then we're working out what we need to extract. Let's do something similar for the domain name. So again, when you're going about this, you need to think, these can be quite tricky. I found these quite difficult over the years, knowing sort of which things to use, how to extract them. They can get quite complicated. But for this domain or this scenario, I'm going to use the right text function this time. So we're going from the right-hand side of the cell. Our first argument is, what text do we want to extract from? What cell? So that is B4. And actually, sorry, I need to do the len function first. So len will give you how many characters you have in the length of a text string. So I want to work out the number of characters in the length of the text string first of all. So I'm going to, actually, no, sorry, I'm getting really confused with this. Let me just backtrack a second. Let's start that again. I'm sorry, my brain isn't working today. We want to do right. We do want to select our text first of all. So B4, comma. Then when it comes to specifying the number of characters, because we don't know, we need to work it out. So we're going to do len. And this is going to give us the number of characters in the entire length of this string. Our argument is just text. So where do we want to count this length? In B4. Close the bracket. And then we're going to do minus find. And again, we're going to search for that @ symbol, and we're going to put it in quotes. Within text B4, and then we're going to close off both brackets. So essentially what we're doing is we're saying, okay, what is the length of this text string? So it's going to count the number of characters. We're then going to say minus from that wherever you find the @ symbol. So it's going to minus from it that number of characters, and we're going to work from the right. And that's going to give us the domain name, and copy that down. Okay, so two different ways by utilizing something that's common within them all to extract items from text. Okay, these are definitely worth having a play around with. There's so many different combinations, and as you can probably tell, I get very confused when you've been using these all the time. It does get a little bit confusing which ones to use, but that is how you can do it. Let's move on. SUMIFS and COUNTIFS. Now, when I speak to advanced Excel users, and I asked them recently, again on LinkedIn, I was asking people what formulas they find most, or what formulas they find that they use the most. And time again, people came up with SUMIF and COUNTIF. And those are both very, very useful functions. So what I want to do in this particular example is I'm going to show you SUMIF and COUNTIF, but I'm also going to show you SUMIFS and COUNTIFS. Because these ones, the SUMIFS version, the versions with the S on the end, allow you to match multiple criteria as opposed to just one piece of criteria. So let's take a look at the data that we're going to be using. So we have here some months, January to April. We have some models of cars. We have colors for those cars, and then we have the revenue that they've generated. I will say I know nothing about cars. If you're on this call and you know a lot about cars, you're probably thinking, well, that's not how much they cost. I don't know. I don't even have a car. So I'm sorry if these are way out, but it's not really relevant as long as we know how to use our formula to extract what we need. Now, what I'm going to do here is you can see in the middle we have criteria 1, criteria 2, and criteria 3. Now, the first one here, criteria 1, in this first example, it's just one piece of criteria that I'm going to use. And what I want to say is I want to find out the total revenue for all cars that are sold in April only. That is my criteria, April. So if I have one piece of criteria, I can use SUMIF. I want to add all of them together, all right? Open brackets. So my first argument is the range. So my criteria is April, so the range is going to be the month range, comma. My criteria is what's in cell G4, which is April, and then I need to provide my sum range. So what do I want to add up? Well, I want to add up the revenue for April. So that is my sum range. Close bracket, hit enter, and there I get the total revenue for everything that's been sold in April only. So that is where you can use SUMIF. Now, if you want to add in more pieces of criteria, then that is where you need to progress onto using SUMIFS with an S on the end. So let's do SUMIFS, open bracket. Now, this is organized in a slightly different way. In the previous example, the sum range was specified at the end of the formula, whereas when you're dealing with multiple criteria, it's specified at the beginning of the formula. So what am I summing here? I am summing the revenue. So I want to select the sum range, comma. Criteria range 1. Okay, so what is my first piece of criteria? Well, my criteria here is April and BMW. So my first criteria range is going to be the month, comma. My first piece of criteria is April, G5, comma, and then it moves on to criteria range 2. So my next piece of criteria is BMW, so I'm going to find that in the model range, comma, and my criteria is BMW. Close the bracket, hit enter, and it gives me my result. Let's do it one more time, this time with 3 pieces of criteria. We're going to do SUMIFS. Again, we're doing our sum range, which is the revenue, comma. First criteria range, hopefully you're getting the hang of this now, is our month. Our criteria is the month. Our second criteria range is the model. And our criteria 2 is BMW. And then our third criteria range this time is the color. And the criteria is white. Close the bracket, hit enter, and we get our result. Now the final example here, I have 2 pieces of criteria, but I am actually going to have 3 pieces of criteria, but my third piece isn't actually listed here. So let me show you what you can do here. I'm going to do SUMIFS again, and we're pretty much going to do exactly the same thing. So our sum range is going to be our revenue, comma. Criteria 1, this time my first piece of criteria is BMW, so my criteria range is the model, and that is my criteria, H7, comma. Criteria range 2 is the color, so we're going to select that, and my criteria is green, comma. But my third piece of criteria is that I only want to sum cars that are over a certain value, okay? So my criteria range 3 is going to be the revenue, and I want to say only sum cars with a value greater than 40,000. Okay, so you can add things like that into your calculations as well. And now that's just summing those cars that match all of those 3 pieces of criteria. Okay, so SUMIFS, really, really useful. Now, you can also do the same thing with count. So COUNTIFS works in a very similar way. Now, I'm not going to go through all 3 of these due to time, because if you can do SUMIFS, then you're going to be able to do COUNTIFS as well. Let's just do the second one here. So I'm going to type in COUNTIFS. So this time I want to count how many cars I've sold in April that are the BMW model. So my first criteria range, again, is the month, comma, my criteria is April. Second criteria is the model, and my criteria is BMW. Close my bracket, and it's telling me that I had a count of 3. Okay, so it pretty much works exactly the same way. Both super useful functions for you to know when you're working in Excel. Now we've got about 9 minutes left, and I do want to leave a couple of minutes at the end for anybody who has any questions. So that should be just enough time for me to show you offset, match, and sum. Now again, offset is a really useful function, but might not be a function that you have played around with much or used much. So let me just explain to you what offset does for those of you that haven't used it. So down here, let's just type in offset and take a look at our arguments. Now what offset allows you to do is specify a starting cell, and then you can essentially count down a number of rows and count across a number of columns, and then specify a height of a cell or a width and produce the range of cells in that particular position. So let me show you a quick example. The first argument here is reference. So this is your starting point. Now your starting point can be any cell that you like. So I'm going to say that my starting cell is going to be A3, this one in the top corner, comma. The next argument is rows. So I can say, okay, I want to go down 2 rows, which is going to basically take me down to where we have company B, comma. How many columns across do I want to go? Well, let's just go across 2 columns. And then what height and width do you want? So I'm going to say a height of 1, but a width of 4. Let me show you what that looks like, which will make you understand that a little bit better. I'm going to close the bracket. Let's see what we get. So we started in cell A3. We counted down 2, and then we counted across 2. So the first number is 3,850. I specified a height of 1 cell. So it's only showing me the height of 1 cell. but I specified a width of 4 cells. Sorry guys, there's a police car going by. I hope you can't hear that too loudly. I'll just wait until he's quiet. There we go. So I specified a width of 4 cells. So it's basically showing me these 4 cells here in my output. Okay, so that is how the offset function works. And of course, if you wanted to, you could select a height of 2, which would make it look like that, and 4 going across, and that would be the range it would output. Okay, so that is offset. So how I want to use that in this example is, you can see here, again, I've got some data validation lists that I've already set up where I can select a company. So let's just say company G, and I can select a year. So what I'm saying here is I want to sum all of the sales for company G up to the year 2017. So I want my calculation to look for company G. I want it to sum everything up to the year 2017. So effectively these 4 cells. And I can do that using offset, match, and sum. So let's start out by typing in offset. Open my bracket. I need to provide a starting point. So again, this can be anywhere you like. I'm going to stick with A3, comma. How many rows do I want to count down? How many rows down is company G? Well, I could count down the rows, but the thing is, this is very much determined by whatever I have or whatever I've picked in that drop down. So at the moment it says company G, but I might choose to pick company I, company A, and this formula needs to be able to accommodate that. So I want the rows to basically match whatever is in cell L3. So we need to add into here a match. My lookup value is going to be L3, comma. Where am I looking that up? Well, I want to find the company name in my list of companies A4 to A21, comma, and I want it to exactly match that company name. So it's going to be a 0. Close off the match, and I'm now back into my offset formula, comma. The next thing I need to specify is columns. So how many columns across? Well, 1. And height is going to be 1 as well. Now, when it comes to width, again, that is going to be specified by the value that we have in cell L4. So this is where I need to do another match. So I'm going to type in match, open bracket. My lookup value is going to be whatever is in L4, comma. My lookup array is going to be B3 to I3, comma, and I'm doing an exact match for 2017 in this case. So we want a 0 on the end. Now I need to close off all of these different functions. So I think I need 1, 2, 3. I think that's right on the end there. Okay, and hit enter. I've still missed off one. There we go. And it pulls those back like that. Now that is not exactly what I wanted it to look like. What I want it to do is add together all of these sales. So let's edit our formula. All we need to do here is wrap this in a sum calculation. So I'm going to add sum on the end, make sure we add another bracket, hit enter, and now we have all of those figures added together. And if I was to go in and change these, you'll see that everything updates nicely. So that is how you can use offset, match, and sum all together in a formula. Phew, okay, that is all I've got for you guys, and we're pretty much dead on time, so I'm quite proud of myself there. Let me just, again, because I'm not used to handling the logistics of these webinars, normally I would hand over to Adam at this point, and he would take some questions. So let me just jump back and stop sharing, because I think that will allow me to see your questions.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To get 4 free courses in Excel, QuickBooks, Microsoft Project, and Photoshop, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.